Why did the blog post body paragraphs feel like an introverted, emotional echidna? Because they were always hiding behind walls of text and spikes of information, afraid to come out and engage with the readers. So bad.
Everything you need to easily pass English ATAR. English ATAR made simple. Powered by Saints Coaching.
Body paragraphs, the meat of your interpretive text. What do good body paragraphs look like? Especially when they incorporate the structure we learned a few lessons ago. That is the subject of today's lesson. The last 3 lessons on interpretive text are prerequisites for this one. So make sure you go and watch those and complete their related activities before continuing with this one. If you are still here, let's see what's in store for this lesson. Let's mix it up a bit and start with a recap of the structure of sections 2 to 4, which are the body paragraphs, just for something different. After that, we'll do a brief recap of example 1. From there, we'll move into analyzing section 2. Main idea 1 focuses on imaginative language features. Then we will go to section 3. Main idea 2 focuses on persuasive language features. From there, we will take a look at section 4. It's main idea number 3, and it uses a blend of imaginative language features and persuasive language features. You know what's coming next. So let's just turn straight to the structure of sections 2 to 4, the body paragraphs. Recap. Here is an overview of the structure of the 3 sections that we're taking a look at in this lesson. Let's have a quick chat about section 2, main idea number 1 first. Here is the relevant section of the tube. Firstly, we know that each main idea has a heading, as indicated through this little H up here. Our first subsection is section 2.1, which is the idea. This is 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea that section 2 discusses. From there, we've got section 2.2, example. This is where you should discuss 1 to 2 examples that demonstrate the finer details of the idea. Final element is section 2.3, the explain. Here, you should discuss the main idea's significance or broader implications. Also note that section 2.2 and section 2.3 have a subheading, as we can see through the SH here and here. That is the structure of section 2. Our 3 elements are idea, example, and explain. We know them better as introverted, emotional, echidna. The structure of section 3 is the same as section 2, but with one main addition. Relevant section of the tube. Section 3.1, it's the idea. This is 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea section 3 discusses. Next up, we have the example, section 3.2. This is where you should discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the main idea's finer details. Section 3.3 is the explain. Here, you should explain the main idea's significant or broader implications. Once again, we can see that the example and the explain each have a subheading. Also, we can note at this stage that the structure of section 3 is identical to the structure of section 2. However, the fact that section 3 has a 4th element is what makes section 3 different from section 2. That 4th element is section 3.4, the quote. This subsection requires you to identify a concise or noteworthy piece of information you've written in section 3.1, 3.2, or 3.3 and reproduce it in large text. That is the structure of section 3. It uses persuasive language features. It has a heading. Our 4 elements are idea, example, explain, and quote. Our mnemonic, similar to what we saw before, introverted, emotional, echidna, quest. The final section we are recapping is the structure of section 4. It is main idea number 3. It uses a blend of imaginative language features and persuasive language features. And the fact that this section uses a blend of those language features is what distinguishes this section from the structure of section 2. So our first element of section 4 is section 4.1, the idea. This is 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea section 4 discusses. Section 4.2 is the example. This is where you discuss 1 or 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. Final element is section 4.3, the explain. This explains the main idea's significance or broader implications. Like we saw in section 2 and section 3, the example and explain elements each have a subheading. That is our structure of section 4. It has got a heading, and these 3 elements are the same as section 2. Idea, example, explain. We use introverted, emotional, echidna, rightio. We have recapped the structure of the body paragraphs of our blog post. Now let's do one more recap of example 1. Our greatest experiences are our quietest moments. Create an interpretive text in which you reflect on this quotation. Step 5 of the planning steps, recap. This is the full version of step 5. Take a look at the following underlined elements. Notice how those elements manifest in the following paragraphs that we're about to discuss. Before we get to those paragraphs, here is the original version of the headline and introduction for example 1 that we looked at in the previous lesson. Pause the video again if it's been more than 3 days since you completed the lesson on introductions. We've done all the recap stuff. Now let's take a look at section 2. Main idea number 1. Its focus is on imaginative language features. It has a heading. Original version, deconstructed version. The heading, the Philippines and privilege. The idea. What does privilege mean to you? Honestly, I didn't know the meaning of the word before 2014. Up until that point, my life had known nothing but privilege. I grew up in Perth, Australia, with a loving family, a roof over my head, a comfy bed, delicious food, and warm water. I went to a private school, the grounds my dad would often liken to Hogwarts due to how well kept and vast they were. As I said, this way of life was all I knew. Here's the example starting with a subheading, 2 coffee tables. And then came the Philippines. My school hosted a 2-week Philippines immersion program every year for a group of about 12 year 10 and 11 boys. The first week was the most eye-opening and influential of my life. Upon arriving at a remote Catholic school on one of the numerous Filipino islands, we were paired up with a Filipino buddy whom we'd be living with for the next 7 days. My buddy was Roberto, and his family of 6, now 7, lived in a 2-bedroom hut the size of an oversized garage. Roberto led me to a room with 2 coffee tables that were low to the ground and very long, and told me to make myself at home. For a split second, I had no idea what Roberto meant. Then I realized the coffee tables weren't coffee tables at all. They were our beds. Over the next 7 days, I was immersed in the lifestyle of Roberto's family. We ate rice and drank Coke, which was cheaper than clean water, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, showered with buckets of cold water, and washed our clothes in the nearby stream. Each morning at about 5:30 a.m., I was woken by the oinks and cock-a-doodle-doos of Barney and Roger, the family's pig and rooster that were on the other side of the 1 centimeter thick bamboo that was our bedroom wall. Turning to the explain and the subheading of it, putting things into perspective. So, what makes the Philippines my first great experience? Simply put, it highlighted how much I took for granted over the first 16 years of my life. It highlighted how privileged I am to have 24/7 access to clean drinking water, sleep on a soft mattress, and have a sturdy roof over my head. Nowadays, if I'm having a bad day, I try to put it in perspective by asking myself, is this really so bad? That is section 2. Here are some comments in relation to it. Starting with the first section, section 2.1, idea. Not too much to note about this heading, other than that it encapsulates what this section will be about. Taking a look at this first sentence of the idea, it immediately engages the reader by asking them a question, and it reinforces what the main topic of section 2 is, privilege. I grew up in Perth, Australia, with a loving family, a roof over my head, etc. This emboldened part illustrates how privileged I am and foreshadows what I will discuss in the example. Speaking of the example, let's take a look at it. Notice how the subheading is written in sentence case, which is where the first letter of the first word in the sentence is capitalized, and the heading is written in title case, which is where the first letter of each major word is capitalized. Using sentence case for subheadings and title case for headings allows the marker to distinguish between the different types of headings in your blog post. On a slightly separate note, this subheading doesn't really have anything to do with what I've already discussed in the post. It's designed to make the reader think, what is all this about? I guess I better read on if I want to find out. The diction or word choice of this sentence in bold is designed to captivate the reader. Compare the first week was the most eye-opening and influential of my life with the first week was great. Which version is more likely to engage the reader? They were our beds. This is another example of using short diction and short syntax for dramatic effect. I also use some sensory imagery to spark the reader's imagination and to encourage them to put themselves in my shoes. His family of 6, now 7, lived in a 2-bedroom hut the size of an oversized garage. This part of the sentence employs visual imagery. So does this part. A room with 2 coffee tables that were low to the ground and very long. We ate rice and drank Coke, which was cheaper than clean water, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That uses gustatory imagery. It's in the LFB. Showered with buckets of cold water and washed our clothes in the nearby stream. Showered with cold buckets of water uses tactile imagery, and washed our clothes in the nearby stream uses visual imagery. I was woken by the oinks and cockadoodle-doos of Barney and Roger. This sentence employs auditory imagery. Finally, the 1 centimeter thick bamboo that was our bedroom wall employs visual imagery. That's our example. This is the explain. Like the previous subheading, 2 coffee tables, this subheading was also created by extracting a few pieces of information from the body text of the section it relates to. Body text, I try to put it in perspective by subheading, putting things into perspective. This first sentence of the explain, what makes the Philippines my first great experience, engages the reader by asking them a question. It refers back to the quotation in the question, and it suggests that I'm about to explain the broader significance of the experience and offer something valuable to the reader. We can see this sentence employs a tricolon listing 3 things when it mentions clean drinking water, sleep on a soft mattress, and have a sturdy roof over my head. This emboldened part of the explain refers back to the idea subsection, specifically the part that says a roof over my head, a comfy bed, delicious food, and warm water. It also refers back to the example subsection, specifically we ate rice and drank Coke, which was cheaper than clean water, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, showered with buckets of cold water. The repeated references to these basic needs create a thread that underlies the entire section, a theme. This part of the explain uses anaphora to emphasize how eye-opening and transformative this experience was. This sentence explains the significance of my trip to the Philippines and subsequently realizing how privileged I am. Finally, this subsection ends with a rhetorical question. Is this really so bad? The meaning of this rhetorical question relates to the meaning of the subheading, putting things into perspective. Is it really so bad? Let's put it into perspective. It also encourages the audience to reassess their perception of a bad day. Section 2, done. Section 3, main idea number 2 uses persuasive language features. It has a heading. Original version, deconstructed version. Heading. University and perseverance. Idea. University probably takes the cake for my greatest experience, not because it was fun, but because it was the most challenging thing I've ever done. Here is the example. Subheading. Esoteric legal questions, competitiveness, and coffee. In October 2020, almost 5 years into a 6-year journey to get a postgraduate law degree, the idea of becoming a lawyer finally dawned on me. It was unbearable. Before you ask yourself, is law really that bad? I want to let the record show that the idea of being a lawyer was intolerable for me. Some people live and breathe the law, but I'm not one of them. My quiet moment came after a period where esoteric legal questions, competitiveness, and coffee were in abundance. I realized that wasn't how I wanted to live and that my time on this planet was too short not to pursue something I was passionate about. Realizing that in the middle of the semester didn't make finishing it very easy. I barely made it through the exam period and was left with an important decision to make over the summer holidays. To finish my last year or to defer. I ultimately and painstakingly decided to finish because I knew that had I deferred, I probably wouldn't go back. The thought of having 1 year unfinished of the 6-year journey was more unbearable than a career in law. After making that decision at the end of 2020, I set out to implement some systems to ensure I'd make it through 2021. The nature of those systems is worthy of a whole other blog post, but suffice it to say that they enabled me to have the best year of my academic career, typified by by my result of 87% for my mini thesis. That is the example, here is the explain. The subheading, post-uni gratitude. There is always a period in one's life when one has to do something they don't want to. Whether it be year 12 and its associated stresses, a casual job you have no modicum of interest in, or a university degree. Regardless of what that thing is, persevering through it enables us to cherish what comes after. For me, that was starting a business. Every day, I compare my current situation to life in law school and feel immense gratitude. Had that experience at uni never occurred, I highly doubt I'd be as happy as I am today. Finally, we have the quote subsection. Regardless of what that thing is, persevering through it enables us to cherish what comes after. Deconstructed version of main idea, let's discuss some things about it. Starting with the idea subsection. Note the effect of the idiom takes the cake on the construction of a casual voice as was planned for. I've also used the term greatest experience, which appears in the quotation in the question. The final part of the idea, not because it was fun, but because it was the most challenging thing I've ever done, is a balanced sentence. Not because, but because. Look it up in the LFB. This sentence also immediately engages the reader through the use of the words, the most challenging thing I've ever done. Compare this ending of the sentence with, it was hard. This sentence might be more concise, but it certainly doesn't have the same oomph that this version does. Turning to the example. This subheading piques the reader's curiosity by giving them a little taste of what's to come without giving too much away. In October 2020, almost 5 years into a 6-year journey to get a postgraduate law degree, the idea of becoming a lawyer finally dawned on me. This first sentence is an example of a periodic sentence. It withholds its main idea until the end, after several subordinate clauses. The main idea being the idea of becoming a lawyer finally dawned on me, the subordinate clauses being everything that came before those parts of the sentence. This sentence, before you ask yourself, is law really that bad, preempts a counter-argument the audience might have. Also, the use of legal jargon, let the record show, is ironic because I'm saying I don't like law. Underlining the words for me indicates that being a lawyer isn't intolerable for everyone. I'm emphasizing that it was just for me. These words would be italicized if they were typed, but when you're handwriting, underlining is a good substitute for italicizing. Note how I've used the term quiet moment in the first sentence of the example, which obviously relates to the term quietest moments in the quotation of the question. Also note that the reader can contextualize the subheading immediately once they read this first sentence in this subsection. Your objective with the subheading is to make the reader think, oh, that's what it means, once they've contextualized it in the body text. Let's hone in on a few words used in this part of the example. Esoteric, abundance, painstakingly, typified. This fancy diction works with the university law aspect of the main idea this overall section discusses. Another thing to note is that I didn't use a rhetorical question or an expert opinion as I planned to do in step 5 of the plan. I didn't do this because it would have felt forced. As I got into the flow of writing, I realized there just wasn't space for a rhetorical question or an expert opinion, and the paragraph works fine without it. Ending the example on this positive note, I had the best year of my academic career and I got a good mark for a mini thesis, implies that perseverance is rewarding, and segues to an explicit discussion of the example in the next subsection. Moving on to the explain. Post-uni gratitude refers to one of the main sentences in this paragraph. Every day I compare my current situation to life in law school and I feel immense gratitude. The subheading also alludes to the crux of what the explain says, which is persevering through something you don't like makes you grateful for more things. The first sentence tells the reader I've stopped talking about myself and started talking about stuff that relates to them. Instead of using pronouns like my and me, I'm using ones and one and they. I reinforce the relevance of what I'm discussing again in the second sentence when I talk about Year 12 and its associated stresses, a casual job you have no interest in, or a university degree. In the final two sentences, we've got the use of some emotive language through the terms immense gratitude and as happy as I am today. This last sentence also encourages the reader to think of an unpleasant experience so they can feel happier for not being in that situation in the present. Final element of this section is the quote. This quote embodies the main idea and its significance. It essentially says perseverance helps us feel grateful. It also just sounds pretty deep, and it has general application to the reader. The following sentence from the explain could have worked as the quote, but notice how it's more specific to my situation. I'm using first person pronouns, I am, and therefore it's just naturally less relevant to the audience. So that's why I think this is the better option, because its application to the reader is more evident. Section 3, done. Here's section 4. Original version, deconstructed version. Heading, Sweden and preparation. Idea. Internet, money, and language. A lack of preparation regarding those three things makes for a particularly challenging time in a foreign country. I learned that the hard way. Moving on to the subheading of the example, hey, and the body text of the example. In August 2017, I embarked on a 5-month exchange program in Sweden. Specifically, a small town called Uppsala, located approximately 70 kilometers north of Stockholm. For whatever reason, I didn't start packing until the day of my flight from Perth, and it turns out that unpreparedness truly set the tone for the next few days. I arrived in Uppsala on a bus with some fellow exchange goers 30 hours after departing from Perth Airport. After we collected some identification documents and the keys to our dormitories, we were driven to our respective residencies and left to our own devices for the remainder of the day. I hadn't properly made anyone's acquaintance at this point. After walking into my room for the first time and unpacking a few things, I wondered what to do next. I was on the 4th level of a multi-level building for students. Each level consisted of a shared kitchen and 10 rooms, 5 on either side of a corridor. My level was as vacant as a travel agency 1 month into the pandemic. RIP. It was approaching dinner time, so I thought I may as well get some food. I tried to Google where a nearby restaurant or grocery store was, but realized I didn't have any Wi-Fi or cellular. Bugger. Then I thought I could just go for a walk and eventually I'd find somewhere that sells something edible. I locked up my room, and as I walked down the stairs, the elevator didn't have a door. To exit the building, I checked my wallet. It was empty. Shit. I trekked back up the 4 flights of stairs, head lower than it has ever been before, and started walking down the deserted corridor back to my room. Hey, someone says. Another human who speaks English. I turned around, saw an old woman standing in the corridor outside her room, and said, hey, back. The woman gave me a funny look and proceeded to speak what I presumed was Swedish to me. English? I questioned. She shook her head and walked back into her room. I later learned that the Swedish word for hi is hey, pronounced hey. Fuck. This is the explain, and the subheading is my vow. Here is the body text. That night was one of the worst nights of my life. It was so bad not because I went without dinner, but because I was utterly helpless and the entire situation was easily avoidable. 2 days prior, in the comfort of my motherland, I could have simply transferred money to my travel card. Had I done so, I could have walked around long enough to eventually find somewhere to eat and maybe even a router so I could use the internet, organize a travel sim, and translate stuff. But no, I was unprepared. That first night in Sweden was literally and figuratively one of the quietest moments I've ever had. As I lay on my linenless bed, another thing I didn't prepare for, the mental clarity and ensuing epiphany were second to none. There and then, I vowed never to let myself be in a situation like that again. I vowed that next time I'd be prepared. That is the deconstructed version of main idea 3. Here are some comments. Firstly, we've got another big boy. It's too long. It lacks white space. We will address these issues in the review lesson at the end of this module. That's a general note about this entire section. Let's discuss some specific things, starting with subsection 4.1, the idea. Internet, money, and language. This first sentence is a tricolon. It lists 3 things, and paired with the heading, Sweden and preparation, it outlines the theme of the anecdote which I describe in the example, and it precisely tells the reader what this section will discuss. My experience in Sweden being unprepared, having no internet, no money, or no understanding of the language. A couple of things about this final sentence. This sentence concludes this subsection on a bit of a cliffhanger, and it sets up the anecdote I describe in the example. So let's take a look at that subsection. Focusing on the subheading first. This subheading is arguably the vaguest in the entire response. By this stage of the post, the reader subconsciously knows that my subheadings normally relate to something in the subsequent body text that the subheading relates to. So after reading this subheading, the reader again can't help but wonder what the significance of hey is. The subheading also foreshadows the twist of this subsection, but it means nothing upon initially reading it because it's out of context. Taking a look at the word unpreparedness in this sentence, this is a really subtle way of telling the marker that I'm staying on track with this section's main idea being Sweden and preparation. I'm not going to read all of this stuff out again, so perhaps that tells you the answer to the following questions. Are these sentences necessary? Do they relate to the main idea? We'll discuss that further in the review lesson. Turning to the last two sentences that we've got on the slide here, my level was as vacant as a travel agency 1 month into the pandemic and RIP. The first sentence employs a simile, and the second sentence uses short syntax and slang. Together, they help the audience visualize the setting through the use of some visual imagery and add some humor, which the post benefits from because the previous sections had a more serious tone. Another thing to note is how aspects in this paragraph relate to the first sentence of the idea subsection. Didn't have any Wi-Fi or cellular, relates to internet. I checked my wallet, it was empty, money. Finally, the Swedish word for hi is hey, language. Over here we've got two long sentences, then I thought I could just go for a walk, etc. I locked up my room, etc., followed by two short sentences. It was empty, shit. These long sentences interspersed with short sentences create a dramatic effect. Another thing to note is that the remarks after each failed attempt in doing something elevate in severity, which is just a fancy way of saying the swear words I use get worse. I start off by saying bugger, I then say shit, and then I say fuck. All of these words simultaneously create a sense of humor and hopelessness. Final element of section 4 is the explain. Turning to the subheading of it, my vow. This suggests that I'm going to discuss the lessons learned from the Sweden experience in the following subsection. It also refers to the two last sentences and the promises I made to myself. Starting with the first two sentences of the body text, they use emotive language to reflect on the experience. One of the worst nights of my life, so bad, utterly helpless, and easily avoidable. These underlined sentences imply that I could have avoided one of the worst nights of my life with a couple of hours of planning and preparation. Notice how we've got two long sentences here, interspersed with two short sentences here. But no, I was unprepared. Here we are using short sentences for emphasis, and the second short sentence, I was unprepared, relates to the main idea this section discusses. It's in the heading, Sweden and preparation. Reusing the term quietest moments from the quotation in the question reminds the marker that I am answering the question. As I lay on my linenless bed, the mental clarity and ensuing epiphany were second to none. This emboldened part relates to my definition of a quiet moment that I outlined in the introduction. I mean a moment that's so quiet in a psychological sense that I've experienced immense mental clarity and an epiphany as a result. Then we've got these two final sentences. They use anaphora by repeating the words I vowed at the beginning of each sentence. They contextualize the subheading, vow, vow, my vow, and they emphasize the value of being prepared, which is what the main idea is all about, through diction like vow. The word vow has sacred connotations and packs more punch than the words promise, for instance. That marks the end of our analysis of the body paragraphs. Let's do a simple summary of that analysis. First main part of the lesson, we recapped the structure of sections 2 to 4, the body paragraphs. First subsection of this part was the structure of section 2, main idea 1. The focus is imaginative language features. It has a heading. Mnemonic, introverted, emotional, echidna. The I stands for the idea. It's section 2.1, and that is 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea section 2 discusses. The E stands for example. It's got a subheading. This is where you discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. Section 2.3 is the explain, also has a subheading, and this is where you explain the main idea's significant or broader implications. That is the structure of section 2. The structure of section 3 is very similar. Its focus is persuasive language features. It's got a heading. Main idea number 2, the mnemonic, introverted, emotional, echidna, quest. Section 3.1 is the idea, and this is once again 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea section 3 discusses. The E in that mnemonic stands for the example. It's got a subheading, discusses 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. Next element is section 3.3, the explain, also has a subheading, explains the main idea's significance or broader implications. Final subsection of this section of our blog post is the quote. The quote requires you to identify a concise and noteworthy piece of information you've written in section 3.1, 3.2, or 3.3, and then reproduce it in large text. Our final recap was of the structure of section 4. It is main idea number 3. It uses a blend of imaginative and persuasive language features. It also has a heading. The mnemonic is the same as section 2, introverted, emotional, echidna. The I stands for the idea, a few sentences that refer to the main idea the section discusses. The E stands for example, got a subheading. This is 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. Final subsection is 4.3, the explain, also has a subheading. This explains the main idea's significance and broader implications. After that, we moved on to our discussion of section 2, main idea 1, section 3, main idea 2, section 4, main idea 3. Here are some key takeaways that we learned in the lesson in relation to the elements of all of these sections. Starting with the idea. You don't need to be as explicit in stating the idea of this section as you would in the topic sentence of a responding section essay or a persuasive speech. For example, what does privilege mean to you? This was how I implied what the main idea was for one of the sections in the example element of it. Another takeaway, the idea should concisely indicate what the section will be about. For example, internet, money, and language. Here are some takeaways regarding the example element. Firstly, using sentence case for subheadings and title case for headings allows the marker to distinguish the difference between the types of headings in your post easily. Also, consider writing the example or explained subsection before writing the subheading. So this would essentially involve leaving a blank line, writing the subsection, picking a piece of information from that subsection, and then writing that piece of info on the line that you left blank. Another one, your objective with the subheading is to make the reader think, oh, that's what it means, once it has been contextualized. If you're using an anecdote, it's a good idea to employ some sensory imagery. A theme you might have identified in those example sections is the example will probably be the longest part of each section. In light of that, consider breaking it up into 2 to 3 smaller paragraphs. Another thing we discussed regarding the example is when you're handwriting, underlining text is a good substitute for italicizing. Importantly, don't cram something you planned to include in your response if that thing just doesn't fit. This next key takeaway is a bit of a classic. Hopefully you've got this point. Reuse keywords from your main idea throughout the section to remind the reader what you're focusing on. For example, main idea, Sweden, and preparation. Relevant part of the example, it turns out that unpreparedness truly set the tone for the next few days. Final point regarding the example is as follows. Ensure every sentence relates to the main idea. If it doesn't, delete it. Here's some useful stuff regarding the explain. You can create a theme by repeatedly referring to important aspects of your main idea in each subsection. For example, in the idea subsection, I wrote a roof over my head, a comfy bed, delicious food, and warm water. In the example subsection, I wrote, we ate rice and drank Coke for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, showered with cold buckets of water. And then in the explain 24/7 access to clean drinking water, sleep on a soft mattress, and have a sturdy roof over my head. There is a theme of what I'm talking about here, and that theme appears in each subsection of the relevant section. Some other things regarding the explain. The theme of each main section for section 2, imaginative for section 3, persuasive for section 4, both imaginative and persuasive, is a guide. If I was to break it down as simply as I can for you, as long as you are using a combination of those language features, imaginative and persuasive, throughout your text, you're all good. A final thing to note about the explain. It should prevent the reader from asking themselves once they've finished reading the section, that was interesting, but what did I get out of it? Final subsection is the quote. As we can hopefully recall, this subsection only appears in section 3. One important thing about the quote is that it should be relevant to the audience and it should embody section 3's main idea. Finished. That is a wrap for this lesson, and that means you've just completed the second last lesson on interpretive texts. So close. Obviously, the next lesson will be on conclusions. Before you get there, you know what you got to do. The activities ask you to continue writing the responses you wrote introductions for in the previous lesson's activities. Read the instructions carefully. Don't think, just do. The idea of doing these activities is always so much worse than the reality, I promise. So, just do it! And I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, keep it simple.